tomorrow. Hey, Gabby. What does that look?
You know what? We're taking this car back to the dealership now.
I better drive. Maybe we stop by Jenna's on the way over. Show us a cool car your dad got, huh?
Give the gift of Lexus and definitely talk it over first.
All right, well, there's 5 of us. That's enough. I'm not sure where everyone else is at, but that's okay. I just didn't want to play along. All right, I'm going to pass. This won't take very long. You just take one, and you guys have made a nice, interesting little line here. So just
I think my laptop was dead.
that's a happens to me all the time. Then you, all by yourself over here. Oh. Let's see. Not sure if you've dove into the stuff that's online yet. If you did, this might look a little bit familiar. If you haven't, this might look like a foreign language. So just want to get this passed out. It was interesting on Tuesday, we literally changed the assignment in real time based off of how far we got. And again, I've done this assignment a lot, but usually, in a normal setting, and we don't break out into groups and talk about that. And I wasn't sure how it would fly during a pandemic, but we figured it out on Tuesday, and I think we figured out that's the best way to do it. So let me open up the week 5 content. Again, by Thursday, I'm always assuming you guys have already done this. So these 3 links, we're actually going to watch one of them together. We'll really describe in great detail what a genogram is. In fact, a couple of them might sound a little bit repetitive. That's kind of the point. Pound it in your head how to make one. Eventually in this class, you'll make one of your own family. We're not quite there yet. In fact, that was part of the original assignment, but I just decided that's way too much. We got too much coming down the tubes, and next week's kind of like a short week anyway. So, all right. So, what's a genogram? Well, make sure you watch these links if you haven't done that yet. We've got a little mini lecture that's been up there. It doesn't matter if you watched it already. That's cool. There's really no order. But just that lecture will literally pick up right where we leave off today. But it's been up there. Remember to watch those. There's no video, so it's not like a massive file because you have to download it and hit begin. Everyone always asks, can't get the audio to work. The audio is not working. You have to hit begin slideshow and just watch the PowerPoint. And it plays out for you, and I'm writing on stuff and talking, that sort of thing. But if you have any questions, let me know. But the week 5 overview, what's on tap? Let's see. Well, a few things. Got the quiz, that's been up there. Will it open up this morning? So we got the little mini lecture, the genogram links, and we're still in Bowen. We're in the Bowen section, and we're not even quite done. Even after that online lecture, it's done, but we'll reconnect on that. So this is what changed. The idea going into the week was to do this in class, but the conversations that we had and then watching the film decided actually to be best. So the reason one of these is separate is, well, now we have a new person coming, so I'm going to pass another one out. Welcome.
Hi. I have extras.
You do? I can't even count to 4. That's awesome. So extras of both of them? That's so sad. How can I incorrectly pass out stuff when there's no one even here? So the reason this is separate is you'll actually bring this back. We were going to do it together. You're literally just giving it your best shot. That was the idea to do it in class. It doesn't have to be perfect, but at least give you a chance to try and make one. We'll talk more about this after. We're going to watch part of the movie. I think you knew that going into this. And you'll make a genogram using the family that you watched. But you'll bring this back with you on Thursday. So you actually, just like back in 3rd and 4th grade, you have homework to do to bring back and submit to the teacher. Isn't that fun? No electronics, no Dropbox, just an actual physical assignment to do and bring back with you. Now this you can take home with you. We'll go over some more of this stuff together later on before we watch the movie. Just some rules to how to build a genogram. How does it actually work? And again, with your first crack at it, I'm assuming no one in here has ever made a genogram before. I'm not expecting perfection at all. That's kind of the idea behind this, is try and make one, see what it's like. Other than that, I think we're good. So the other part of this, there's some questions on the back that make no sense quite yet because we haven't watched the film yet. We'll get to that towards the end of class. That's the discussion form. So there's to respond to these in the discussion form. So this doesn't come back until Thursday. If you don't know, if you forgot, I'm not going to see you again. Well, of course, for you guys, it's normal. The Tuesday section's a little bit weird. So what we're going to do is, what's on Tuesday?
Spring break.
Yeah, your spring break is Tuesday. Enjoy it. It's going to be like the 6 inches of snow on Monday night. So yay! Yeah, something like that. No, but anyway, well, suppose, who knows, right? It'll probably change 8 times before. But yeah, my girls are excited. I'm excited because my daughters actually don't have school that day because in Louisville, Ohio, it's vaccine day for the teachers. So I get to sleep in. So don't email me on Tuesday. Just do something else. So what we're going to do on Thursday, this is where it includes you guys. I'll remind you next week. But since my Tuesday section's in limbo, we're going to do a split session on Thursday. What that means, I think I emailed you guys about this. Yeah, so just to remind you, you'll come in the second half. I'll remind you again later. So you don't have to come in until, I think, like 10:30, 10:15, something like that. I can't do math either. So just to get the ball, we're actually going to start in a slightly different place than we did on Tuesday, just so you're thinking about this. Now, there's a website. This is just fun. And then it's fun that we're in Bowen, and we've been using, right, Star Wars and Darth Vader and all those people. This is from a website called genopro.com. It's a professional website built for family therapists. I started using it back in like 2005, making genograms. It's like a program you can install on a computer to help you build genograms with families really easily. This is not planned. In fact, I didn't even know that this was up there. But they always have little helpful videos of what's a genogram, how to make a genogram. And guess what family they decided to use as an example of how to build a genogram?
Pretty much.
The Skywalker. Right? Completely unplanned. But anyway, here you go. Here's a quick 2-minute primer on what you'll be doing, just to get into your head before we get started.
What is a genogram? A genogram is a special type of family tree. A family tree will simply display ancestry information. However, a genogram will display additional information about the relationships of the individuals. Genograms are drawn using standardized symbols that help the viewer understand the relationships. The basic family symbols include a square for a male and a circle for a female. Genograms also include special symbols to indicate if children are twins or if a child is a biological child or adopted, in case that information is helpful. Genograms also may include information about the actual emotional relationships. There are symbols to indicate a wide range of emotions ranging from friendship to hate. Genograms may also be used for medical and genetic analysis by simply tagging individuals with particular traits. Let's look at an example that demonstrates this.
Before we do, so just pull out the one that's stapled. So there are 2 basic parts to a genogram, and here's why I like using them in therapy a lot. If you listen to the online lecture, I talk about this a little more, because it's actually a Bowenian technique. This was his idea. The first part to a genogram, let's say I have 3 people in the room. Okay, I have a mother, a father, and a child. A child old enough to understand how to make one. And if I ask them, I want you to go home this week, and each of you on your own, I'll teach you how to do this, make your own genogram, and then bring it back with you. You might be like, why the hell would you have 3 people do that because they're from the same family? Well, the first part of a genogram is the family diagram. And that's, well, that was the first part that you saw. Family diagram is traditionally done just in black. And every single person in that room's family diagram will look exactly the same. The family diagram is just the facts of the family. Who's married to who, who's divorced, who's related to who, who's the stepmom, how many stepkids. you'll see an example of that. So the family diagram is always the same. If that's all a genogram was, it wouldn't be very interesting because that's just a family tree, right? Ooh, like who can't do that? We can do that together. What makes genograms interesting is the emotional relationship. So you have, well, I should use the black because I said it's usually in black. I'll just do, I mean, you're going to see an example, but just real quick. Let's say I have a husband, he's a square, a wife is the circle. They have, well, here's mine real quick. There's me, and then I have two sisters, whatever it is. All right, so here's my family diagram. Genograms also go up 3 generations. So here's me, that's generation 1. Here's my parents. So traditionally, the genogram goes up. So here's my dad. Well, he's also the son. We'll just keep this as a lie. But let's say he was an only child. And then my mom was in a family at one time, and she had a brother. Right? So you see how this works? And rough drafts are absolutely necessary usually with the genogram because the first time you do it, there's never enough room, and you quickly realize, oh man, I need a bigger line here, something like that. But anyway, this is the basics. So any family, if anyone in the family could do this, it's always going to look exactly the same. What makes it interesting is when you tell the family, all right, and on your genogram, I want you to each pick what you see as the 3 most important emotional relationships inside the family. And if you look on the second page here, on the left-hand side is all of our family diagram lines. You can see marriage, and look at the top, the genogram symbols. If you're a male, female, unknown gender, if you're a pet, you can put your pet on there if you want to. Adopted, pregnancy, miscarriage, identical twins, death. Anything you can think of, they've thought of and made a symbol for. On the left-hand side going down is all of our different lines. Let's say, well, I told you that my parents are divorced, right? Yes, they are. So here's me. Well, my parents are divorced. That's part of the family diagram. It's not an emotional line. And then I love some of these just crack me up. Cohabitation.
Okay.
So you want to put that on your genogram. Here are the facts. I would love affair. Is anyone really going to put that? Like, oh my God, Johnny, no! You made me do my genogram. I wasn't ready to reveal this. But anyway, so all those different, on the left, that's all our family diagrams. Now on the right, now these online, you'll see the color. This is also online for you, by the way. These are always done in color. Emotional, I think you don't have to stick to the colors that they use, but when you ask a family, hey, I want all 3 of you to put the most interesting emotional or the most important emotional relationship, guess what comes back to you? 3 things that are very, very different. I could even ask them, do 5 emotional lines inside your family. And one person might highlight, hey, dad and son seem really estranged from each other. That's one of the emotional outcomes that's probably incorrect. Or someone might say, mom and grandma, man, they're in conflict all the time. These jump out at you and you put them all together and it gives you a really detailed picture from each person's perspective of what the family looks like. So again, let's see them do it with the Skywalker family. If you know anything about Star Wars at this point, you'll find this at least somewhat entertaining.
We will use Star Wars as the Skywalker family as an example. Let's start by looking at Padme's family. Her father Rui, represented by a square, mother Jabal, represented by a circle. She also has an older sister named Sola. We know she's older because she's to the left. Let's get a bigger picture. We can see that Padme is in love with Anakin Skywalker, who is the son of Shmi Skywalker and the Force. Anakin and Padme have twins, Luke and Leia. However, Anakin does not know this and does not know about Leia. Luke is adopted by Owen Lars and Barry Whiteside. Owen turns out to be the son of Clea Lars, who married Anakin's mother after Owen's mother died. On the other hand, Leia is adopted by Bail Presser Organa and Rhea until she takes the Organa family name. Luke has a close violence relationship with his father.
This is my favorite part. No shit, they do. His father has tried to kill him multiple times.
They fight every time they see each other. Luke is friends with Han Solo, who marries Leia, and have a child named Ben. Anakin, Luke, Leia, and Ben are strong carriers of midi-chlorians. we can see a pattern from which we could begin to theorize that this is a hereditary trait. As you can see, a genogram can provide a lot of information, and this is just the beginning. If you want to find out more information about genograms, follow the links in the description.
Or follow the links embedded in your class, and it'll turn out perfect. So, just some basics. Again, we'll revisit that. And the videos, the links that are up there, by the way, they're not like half-hour documentaries on how to make a genogram. I think one's like 10 minutes, one's like 11 minutes, and literally, there's some, I mean, actually, I've been toying around with lately in my practice, just using Microsoft Word. Microsoft Word has some new features where you can, it's kind of cool. You can just like draw on your screen and it like makes a perfect shape for you. It takes the shape that thinks you're drawing. And you can, so I've been using that. But anyway, you can use this, the idea is to hand draw this one and bring it back with you next week. So, but let's get through the notes that we need to get through. We left off with differentiation of self. Well, yes.
Is this PowerPoint in here somewhere on the job?
This one?
Yeah.
Not yet.
Not yet, okay.
Nope. I'm recording this one today, and then I'll put it in there. So it absolutely will be. Do you like going through it while you?
Yeah.
Okay, I can add them before class if you want to.
If it's easy for you, I mean, if it's hard, it's fine.
It's very difficult. I can't. It takes me 3 hours. Damn it! No, it's perfectly fine. So yeah, anytime you have a request, absolutely. So, in fact, I can't do it. But anyway, it'll be up there. I'll try to do that from now on. So we're still going through our basic concepts of Bowen. We did differentiation of self and the family. Any questions on those? A highly differentiated individual, and then a highly differentiated family. And this first part of today is completing like the different concepts. So I think I mentioned this in my online lecture this week too. Every time we go through a theory, we'll have the concepts. It takes a little bit of while with Bowen because there's a lot of them. Then we'll talk about what healthy families look like from this perspective. Then we'll talk about where problems come from and techniques of therapy, et cetera, et cetera. So today, we're really finishing the concepts, and we're going to talk about what a healthy, normal family looks like. The online lecture starts the idea of where do problems come from, and what are some therapeutic techniques with regards to Bowen. And again, before you do take the quiz, you'll definitely want to give, if you haven't watched it already, that online lecture, because a couple questions are from that as well. So differentiate yourself. That's one concept. This second one, chronic anxiety. This, for some reason, this is not in your text, and I'm not sure why, because it's a really important idea to understand Bowen and how he sees families and problems. So here's a little quote from, I mean, it's not really from Bowen, it's just a little quote to help describe this. So chronic anxiety, the first thing to write down under this would be just stress. Stress is the stuff of life. That's what Bowen said at some point. Stress is the stuff of life. All he means by that is, and all of us are aware of it, stress is unavoidable. It's everywhere, all the time, whether we're in a pandemic or not. There's always little stressors around you. That's not a big deal, unless you have a poor level of differentiation. Because then, when you get stressed out, or your family gets stressed out, especially big ones, it might get stuck in you. And that's called chronic anxiety. Chronic anxiety is when stress infests a family system and they can't shake it. I know people in my family who have been arguing for years, and I'm not exaggerating. That's chronic anxiety. So unresolved problems, unresolved issues. If you do become a couples therapist, you'll meet a lot of couples who will say the same, like, we've been having the same argument for 3 years. What? They can't seem to shake the stuff. And Bowen called this chronic anxiety. And it's certainly out there. Another fundamental concept is emotional triangles. I know there's one up there, but I'm going to use a different example too. Person A, here's person B. Emotional triangles develop when two people, let's just use a husband and a wife because that's the easiest example to use. So we have a husband and wife who have some type of issue. She wishes he was more intimate with his emotions. Okay, there's your conflict. Instead of resolving, having the important conversations they need to have, and actually finding a resolution to this, they bring in some type of third party. Let's say, I'm just going to use the child. The mom vents to the kid about the dad. The dad vents to the kid about the mom. Is there a question?
Who is A the wife then?
Oh, it doesn't matter. Sorry. I just, person A, person B. You can pick. Alice and Bob. So instead of resolving their issues, they bring in a third party and never resolve their issue because of that. So emotional triangles are created, that's why I said they're created by some kind of conflict or some kind of anxiety or some kind of stress. And a third person gets involved. Now, this isn't actually always a bad thing. I'm sure a lot of you in this room have had a problem with someone and gone to someone else for help or advice, right? Of course you do. That's part of being a human being. That could be a good thing. And if it's a good thing, we call that an unfixed triangle. So an unfixed triangle is actually a natural, normal, healthy thing to have. What happens in an unfixed triangle is that third person actually does help and helps get persons A and B talking to resolve it. Let's say the third person is a friend. Person A goes to the friend, person B goes to the friend's like, look, I think I have an idea for you guys to help solve this, and gets the two people together to actually talk. The goal being, get me out of this, you guys resolve it, the triangle is destroyed. But what happens in families with low levels of differentiation who can't resolve conflict, triangles becomes fixed. And what that means is it just gets stuck. The conflict never gets solved. The third person kind of remains where they're at for an extended period of time. The reason it can get fixed is, well, there's two functions, and the first one is what feels good. The anxiety is actually lowered temporarily. When you vent to this person, you feel better. Nothing is resolved, but in that moment, you feel better because you got to dump all this stuff onto somebody else. So there's a negative reinforcement kicking in here. It feels good. You finally got to talk about this thing. I can't believe my wife keeps nagging me about this again and again. Yeah, me too, man. Hey, so you temporarily feel better. But then you go home, and the problem's still there. And you find something else, another way to avoid it. The other function these triangles serve, you call it, it freezes the conflict in place. Nothing other ever gets resolved. There's a term that's actually not in your book. I'm going to use the same example that I did. The strange way of thinking about this maybe is that third part of the triangle doesn't necessarily have to be a person. It could be a hobby. It could be a thing. It could be, well, let's put it this way. You've got this argument with your spouse, and every day there's something going on. Right? Oh, well, now we're going to Johnny's basketball game. Now we have this to watch on TV. Now there's this movie coming out that we're going to go see. There's always something going on that the couple will connect to that keeps them from resolving their issue. Does that make sense? Right? So the problem never gets solved, but we temporarily feel better because we got to ignore it for 3 hours. Oh, and now it's 11 o'clock, we've got to go to bed. So these patterns will play out inside these families, and we have a name. Whatever the third thing is, it doesn't matter if it's a child, a friend, or Netflix. Like I said, it could be just a hobby, a thing, a distraction. We call that third thing a distance regulator. I mean, the reason we call it a distance regulator is it helps the people who are in conflict stay a comfortable distance from each other. They never actually have to connect close enough to resolve the issue. So it keeps people away. When Bowen would look at a genogram like this, He's always looking for the triangles inside the family. And that if you looked ahead, one of your questions is about the family that we'll watch later on pretty soon. I think it's the third question, something like that. Consider the genogram you've created. Well, you're not going to create it in class, but what triangle in the family could benefit from a little detriangulation? Well, there you go. So as you watch the film, keep an eye out for triangles. Is there someone caught in one of these? Or you'll see. There we go. The most important one, by the way, one last thing to write down. The most important triangle in the family is the marital couple by far. That's usually the one. All right, a few more. Like Bowen built like a whole glossary of terms for us to define. One thing that we know about families, and genograms help us see this, is that dysfunction does seem to run in families. Right, we talked about divorce a couple weeks ago, how divorce runs in families. From a Bowen perspective, what you would simply say is what's really running through families is low levels of differentiation, both of the self and of the family. Well, how does this happen? Well, he gives a name to it. He calls it the multi-generational emotional process. This is the process, the mechanism by which levels of differentiation are passed down generation to generation to generation. When you see in a genogram, you might see generations of divorce. You look at this sister here, there's a divorce. Well, her parents got divorced. You look up, it's almost like, what the hell? Divorce seems to skip a generation. These two were spared. It's actually a reason why I'm doing this. But you look at this, and it sure does look like, well, what's really running in that family is really kind of crappy relationships. And Bowen would say, well, that's caused by a lack of differentiation. So how does this work? I'll walk you through this. This is probably pretty intuitive. You already read it by yourself. So we start, step one to this happening is we have a family with low levels of differentiation. Okay, so you already know what that means. So we have a family with a low level of differentiation. Somehow, in their own way, they're a little bit screwy with regards to that concept. Remember, that's not good for the people inside this family, because that means we have people inside that system who individually have low levels of differentiation, right? We're going in by our layers. So we have a low differentiated family that produces emotionally reactive children because they have low levels of differentiation. And what do? Well, they go out into their own universe and create their own families with low levels of differentiation. The reason is, I don't know why I have to write this on the board, but just to make sure you write it down. There's actually been data to back this up, because we can actually assess your level of differentiation. When people find a partner, and I don't just mean someone you date for 3 weeks and then hit the eject button with, but committed relationships. When we look at committed couples, their levels of differentiation are almost always the same. If it's low, they find someone else who's low. If it's high, they find someone else who's high. That's a great thing. But if you think about what differentiation means in a person, right? Think of our low differentiation person, right? They're impulsive. They're like chameleons. They don't really have their own identity. Is that person really going to match emotionally with someone who's really high in differentiation, who stands up for themselves, who has their really strong identity, who's not? No. They might date a couple times, but their person A is going to be like, oh, I need to grow up. Like they're not going to match emotionally with this person. But if person A meets someone just like them, they're going to connect pretty well. And this is exactly how this happens. Again, it could be a positive thing. If you're highly differentiated, great. You're going to meet someone else who's mature, like yourself, in terms of differentiation, and you're going to have a positive thing. Does this make sense? So far? So far, so good? All right, so a little bit more on this, and we're zooming in. When we have a family just backing up just a little bit. When we've had a family with low levels of differentiation, there's 4 pretty predictable outcomes. That's why that's up there. The first is we could see a lot of emotional distance within the family. So people that just don't connect. A second possible outcome is either physical or emotional problems. So some mental illnesses, or even physical issues because of all the stress and anxiety. So emotional distance, physical or emotional problems. A third possible outcome is we could just see lots of overt conflict all the time. So hostility inside the family. And the fourth, and this is the reason the Death Star is up there, projection of problems onto the children. So projection, what in the heck? What does that exactly mean? Well, let me give you an example Bowen used to use all the time, and I've seen this play out. Everyone wants a perfect marriage, right? We all want the ideal. We all want something really good. Well, we have a couple that's having problems. We're probably nowhere near that. So we have let's say we have a mom or a wife who wants a perfect marriage but doesn't have anything close to that. Instead of getting the issue resolved with her husband, because she's probably trapped in some kind of triangle, she projects that issue onto her kid by forcing that kid to be perfect. That kid has to get perfect grades. That kid has to be the perfect athlete, get into the perfect school. Nothing is ever good enough. What is it with this mom? Well, what she's projecting on this kid is perfectionism. She doesn't have it in her own life. She doesn't have anything close to it. So it becomes this projected issue onto the kid. In other words, this kid becomes the target of all of the issues. If that relationship in marriage was better, that wouldn't happen, because that mom needs an outlet for all of this angst and anxiety and stress, and she's projecting it onto the child. Does that make sense? So that's what there's like a conversion, right? There's anger, there's stress, there's anxiety, and it's got to go somewhere. And unfortunately, in a family, it usually gets projected onto a child. So that's why the Death Star is up there. So the target, we also know that there's a common target inside family. It doesn't have to work this way. But the most common target, let's say we have this. I technically did this wrong because she's the oldest, so she should be actually on the left side if you're reading your rules. But anyway, if she's the oldest person, this is the person I'm most worried about. If this marriage is crappy, the most common, let's say the Death Star is warming up, the most common target, they're going to project it onto that kid. The oldest kid in the family with multiple kids is the typical target of all this projection. And to add to this, it's usually a female. It's usually the oldest female, I'm going to get specific, inside a family system. Does it always work that way? No. Just for whatever reason, that seems to be the most common target. So low differentiation literally gets passed like a baton, generation to generation, and this is how it works. We've got people trapped in triangles. They don't know what to do with all their stuff, so they project it onto somebody else. They stay the hell away from each other. They're fighting all the time. Nothing's ever getting resolved. Does this make sense? There's 2 more concepts. These last 2 are pretty short, so there's not much on the screen there. With really severe cases of low differentiation inside a family, a common trend that we see is something called emotional cutoff, which is exactly what it sounds like. Let's say at some point, this kid has spent 18 years inside this home getting just shit dumped on them, left and right, right? Well, now they're 18 and they're going to leave the house. because they've been the target of all this stuff for such a very long period of time, when they become adults, guess what's likely to happen? They're just going to say, I am done. I've had enough. And they're going to go over here, and they're going to make their own little island and just build an emotional wall and say, no, I'm done. And we call it emotional cutoff. Cutting yourself off from your family. Now, you hear people on both sides. Some people argue this was a necessary evil that I had to take, a step, because I don't want this toxicity in my life anymore. I can understand that. And there's actually been many situations where I've had clients and just people I know where, unfortunately, this did seem like, believe it or not, the healthiest step that they could take for themselves, because they're thinking about their own kids. They don't want their kids exposed to this stuff, and they just want to move on. Well, something that'll come up in the online lecture too, but I'll just say it here. It's on a couple slides up here too. Something called, Bowen said, the ghosts of the past. Keep this in mind. Yes, this might be a healthy thing for you to do, but keep in mind something he called the ghosts of the past. What he means by that is, if you have unresolved family of origin conflict and issues, you're very likely to carry those with you if they're unresolved into your own family of origin in some way. He used to joke too that you could go to Mars to try to get away from your family, and guess what? They're still going to keep you up at night. They're still going to bug you. Because you have this unresolved stuff. And it's not your fault. He's not blaming them. And in MFT, we're not blaming anyone. But Bowen's really big on family of origin work. Yeah.
So, emotional cutoff. Is it like completely like?
Yeah. You're just done. You're not going to pick
There's
up
no
the phone.
like, you ever turn back or something? Never like, no.
I mean, you might at some point in your life. That's possible. So it can be temporary. Of course. But yeah, emotional cutoff is exactly what it sounds like. You're just, I mean, the way people will talk is they're just dead to me. They died when I was 18. I'm done. So it happens more often than you might think. And then finally, I can't even say it. The societal emotional process. What is this? Bowen unfortunately passed away before he could really elaborate on everything he meant by this. And it was sort of, I guess he's getting older. This is some of in his later works and writings. But this is just Bowen's simple idea. You can agree with this or not agree with this. He just said the United States, the society that we've constructed, is not very conducive to promoting high levels of differentiation amongst our people. He's really talking about some stuff we talked about way back in week 1. The myth of the hero, individualism, not being very familistic. We've got a huge gap between poverty and the rich and the income gaps that exist. We've got lots of areas of high crime that get unaddressed, rates of child poverty, et cetera, et cetera. He just said, by and large, the United States, there's some areas that are doing just fine, but as a whole, he just argued our society isn't doing a good job. Take that for what it's worth. It's in your book, so I put it on here. Soak that in for a second. I love finding these people. I always wonder as the random girl in the wheelchair behind them, I always wonder what's the story here? Like, how did this get staged? And I always wonder what happened 10 seconds after this picture was taken. Like, all right, I must go back to the stage. But anyway, do the legs move, or does someone have to pick those legs up and help them walk around? Like, because they look pretty stiff. That looks pretty, I mean, he spent a lot of time on this. That is dedication, man. That is. But anyway, this next one is one of my absolute favorites. All right. So someone, I don't know whose idea it was. Hey boys, here's what we're doing for this year's Christmas picture. And if you notice, look at the dad. The dad's, maybe, well, there's no other guys in the room, but if the guy wasn't here, you understand. In 7th grade, whenever we all do this. We take pictures because we want to make our biceps look bigger. He's doing that little trick with his arms. He's trying to make, look, see those muscles that I have? Anyway, very cute family that we have there. So this last part today, before we hit play on the film and watch a little bit of it, is talking about what normal families look like, what healthy families look like, because you can't really understand what problems are unless you have like a baseline of normality to compare it to, right? Of course not. So what is normal and healthy? Well, these first 3 things are going to seem pretty intuitive at this point. Number 1, a healthy family has high levels of differentiation of self amongst its members. Okay, that makes sense. Of course it does. That's what a healthy family has. The second one is anxiety and stress is relatively low. And the reason it's low is because they're handling it well. It doesn't mean they're somehow oblivious to problems. They just handle their problems. Problem happens, family works together to solve it. Move on to the next one. So they don't get bombarded with, they don't have any chronic anxiety growing inside them. I always thought of chronic anxiety as like tumors, right? Growing inside a family. Something gets stuck and it just festers. And then the next one comes along and it accumulates and accumulates. But they don't have that. The third one might not be so intuitive. There's good, healthy, emotional relationships with extended family. And this is why genograms, they go up 3 generations. Owen, again, you can agree with this or not, he was really adamant that to be a healthy individual at the present in your own family. Now, he understands, too, like anyone would, you can't control what other people do. Let's say grandma and grandpa are just assholes. And you've tried everything. And what Bowen would say is, as long as you've made the effort, you're good. What he doesn't like is when people just avoid it and don't even make an attempt to resolve conflict. So he gets it. Everything doesn't have to be perfect and harmonious. It's the effort that counts.
Does that have to be both sides of the family? Both
Sure.
the mom side and the dad
Yeah.
side?
So you'll see in the next one, the next slide coming up, when a couple gets together, he sees it as like not just a couple getting together, but both systems coming together. And now we've created some Uber. That's why he does both generations. Like, right? That's all part of you now. Absolutely. So there's a normal trend, which is, it sounds unhealthy, but it's not. There's a normal trend is for, well, you guys are experiencing this right now. As a child grows up older, there should be a decline in connection to the parents. A decline in contact. Did I tell you guys about my first couple and how often? I know maybe that was Tuesday. So they'll come up eventually. One of the first clients that I ever saw, the wife. Well, this actually wasn't even the thing they were arguing about. This was just kind of symbolic. They got married and they got a condo in Columbus. And without telling the husband, the wife had given her mom and her dad and some of her sisters keys to their condo. And he would come home from work and they would be there, like cleaning something, rearranging something, like buying furniture and putting it there. And he's like, what? Like, isn't this our place? And to her, this was like, how could you get mad? Of course I'm going to get my mom. My mom does not have keys to my house, and I don't want her to. And she would also call her mom 7-8 times a day and talk for like a half hour a pop. There's not anything going on, just relax and talk. Whoa! So that's when we talk about examples of families that are too like in to each other. That's cute when you're 8, right? But not when you're 28. Like, there's supposed to be this natural, I guess, weaning off the teat a little bit, right? You're supposed to become your own person. And that's just an example of what he's talking about. So that is a normal trend, but here's where it is. It goes to family pest. He said what's not normal, though, is taking that to an extreme. Now get this. You talk about complementary couples. The husband in that relationship, he talked to his parents maybe once every 3 months. They lived like all over the place. I mean, there was a divorce in the family, but his brother's like in Utah, his dad's in California, his mom he thought was in Canada, and they never, but to him that was normal. So we almost had two complete opposite families of origin, both low in differentiation in their own way, but they matched each other. It's almost like what her family of origin didn't have, his did have, and what his didn't have, hers had, but to extremes. So it was just this bizarre. Man, that'd be fun to come home and like see your mother-in-law just sitting there like, hey, what's up, Bobby? So he just said, beware. This goes to the family past. Slowly cutting off and declining is normal. Emotional cutoff is not, at least to him. So far, normal, healthy functioning. 3 basics, that makes sense. There's a normal trend, a decline in contact. Beware of the ghost of family past. Ooh. Your father as a ghost. All right, he also said that he hesitated to use this word because what we're about to lay out sounds like he's saying this is the best way to do it, and he's not saying this is the best way to do it. What he did, and I don't really think there's much of an argument here, there is, in this society, there is a normal sort of pattern to how families develop. There is, right? It doesn't mean you have to do it. It doesn't mean it's the best way. But he said there's 6 stages of normality in our society of how a normal, healthy family develops. We'll get to those. And there's 3 constant processes along with each stage that families have to successfully kind of conquer or achieve or do well. This might sound odd before you see these stages, but these 3 processes that you have to do successfully. One is expansion. Sometimes families get bigger. So there's going to be 6 stages of normal family development. Expansion happens. So sometimes families get bigger. You add a new member. Maybe that's through marriage or birth or adoption, whatever it is. The second is contraction. Sometimes families get smaller. You left the house. Hopefully you're not a boomerang. Someone passes away. And the third one, though, is crucial. Contraction can happen, expansion can happen. What has to happen, though, is realignment. We have a fancy word for this now because now your family system's nerds like I am. Morphogenesis. Remember that? You got to find a new normal, new homeostasis. That's a positive feedback loop, Dr. Meyer. Exactly. I'll never do that again. Maybe I will. It's fun. So contraction, expansion, and then realignment. That makes sense? All right, so let's take a look at these. But we're just going to make like a highlight for each one. What's going on? When we talk about these, they just sound like your typical, like I could have guessed half of these. But think of, as we're talking about these, I want you to think of your parents and or legal guardians or the family that you came from. Because the interesting thing, Bowen, and I guess this is why, maybe you're seeing this now. Bowen it's all about generations and how patterns repeat themselves in generations, for the positive, for the negative. And again, I don't need to harp on it, but that's what Star Wars is all about. It's families and generations and patterns that you see run down through families. So the first one, you're in this right now. A family has to come from somewhere. So where does a family come from? Well, it has to come from a person leaving their home, leaving their parents for the first time. So what's the big highlight? We got contraction, expansion. Well, it's you successfully becoming independent. So that's our big highlight there. You becoming your own person. This might seem that seems boring, like you just went, well, duh, okay, I get that. Well, I pound this into the brains of my freshmen in my first year seminar every single year. So Mount Union, Ohio State, pick any university you'd like to pick. It doesn't matter if it's private or public. One big issue at every university, especially now, we talked about kind of the climate, is retention. Right? And that simply means holding on to students. If we've got you, especially if we've got your deposit, right? We want you to come back the next year and the next year and you can stay an extra year if you'd like to. Go ahead, 2 years, just keep coming back. So retention is huge. We spend a lot of time at Union focusing on not losing any freshmen, like sheep that would, oh, I don't get them like I'm a shepherd. And this is actually pretty remarkable. For the last 2 years, I've been doing the first year seminar for like 8 years, I think. These past 2 years have been the first 2 years where I haven't lost anyone. It's never happened. My first 6 years is always at least one that goes off and we lose them. And it's always for the same reason. What's the number one reason colleges lose freshmen? Think of all the reasons someone might drop out. What would you guess the number one reason? Because there's lots of reasons, yeah. It's homesickness. Homesickness is, and every single time I've lost a student, that's what it is. They just can't hack being this far away from home. It doesn't mean they drop out of college, so it's not grades or the ability to work. They just want to be somewhere closer to mommy and daddy because they couldn't make this transition successfully of, getting out there. It felt good at first, and then they got here and said no, and they need someplace closer. So this is a big deal. Leaving home it's easy for some, it's not for others. The second one is the joining of the family stage. So this is when you meet someone, maybe you're getting into a committed relationship. Well, let me make another little quick genogram over here. Oh, Everybody Loves Raymond. Perfect example. Remember them? Remember when you watched an episode of that? If you didn't know, I'm not sure how much it came off in that episode, but one of the big issues, I don't need to draw this at all because I have this as an example. One of the big issues in that show is Raymond, right? He's married to Deborah. One of the huge issues which we laugh at in the show is Raymond and his mom and their relationship. His mom comes over all the time. He still listens to his mom. Sometimes he listens to his mom more than he listens to his wife. Deborah gets pissed off because, in other words, he's still like a little boy around his mom, and his mommy still tells him what to do. The primary relationship is supposed to be him and Deborah. There's supposed to be a boundary around him and Deborah, and it's always supposed to take priority. That's the challenge of this. When you join with someone else, that relationship is supposed to become what we call the primary emotional relationship in your life. That's what it means to be in a committed relationship. It doesn't mean your relationship with your mom and dad aren't important at all. It just means they're down a rung now. No, what's best for you is what's best for your couple or your relationship. Your mom might think you should stay here in Ohio, but what's best for you is moving on to San Francisco. It really doesn't matter what your mom thinks anymore. It's what your husband thinks or your wife thinks or you together as a couple. Does that make sense? But this is, again, really difficult for some people. Some people navigate this well. And you can see how a family that has a healthy level of differentiation would handle this well, right? But a family that doesn't have this isn't going to react to these things in a healthy way. The next one, this one will just jump out and be obvious to you, but we have another little catchy phrase from Bowen to use here. So families with young children. All right, I guess I'm still kind of in this, although they're growing up, which is frightening. 13 and 9. So one of them's here, one of them's about to cross over into the threshold. But what's the challenge of this? What would you guess? I mean, thinking of the couple here. Here's our catchy phrase. Remember I within a we? Well, there's another one. The highlight here is maintaining the we within the they. Don't you love that? So you can write that down. Maintaining the we within the they. What that means is, yes, wonderful, you have a child. It's miraculous. But you still need a boundary around yourself as a couple. You still need to be a romantic, dating couple. No, I don't mean whatever. It changes. Of course it does over time and it fluctuates. But you still need to be the couple. You can't lose sight of that. Kids can eat a relationship alive if you let them. And I'm not talking about like the first 6 months when someone needs to be there. You'll meet couples in therapy, and this sounds cliche, but it's you'll meet couples who literally haven't been on a date with each other in years, like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They can't even remember the last time they went out to dinner with each other. It just disappeared. And sometimes couples don't even see it happening. It just, the minutia of having kids takes over, and their lives and their jobs, and the we gets lost. And then, of course, we have adolescence. Now, this is where you were recently. The battle here, of course, is the child now is beginning to seek more independence and is starting to break away a little bit. They don't want to ride the roller coaster with you anymore. They want to ride the roller coaster with their friend. Ooh, that hurts. Actually, it's a healthy thing. It's hard, but it's a healthy thing. That's it. Your kids should want to do that. But this is a challenge. Remember, we're talking about togetherness in a family, togetherness and separateness, right? How do I hold you close? How much do I let you go? That's a balance here. So we're starting to see this emerge. And then, of course, I love this, the launching of the children. That's our 5th stage. Your parents just did this, maybe. All right, now this is where I said, think of your parents as we're talking about these. Because here's where it gets interesting when you think about your own family and your own parents. You're here at the same time your parents are here. Guess what? You're going to be here before you know it. It's going to go fast. And you're going to think about this lecture. No, you're not. But isn't that weird to think about? Your parents, just think of your parents. They were there. If you talk to them it'll feel like, it hasn't been that, oh my God, we've been together for 20 years. That's insane. We were just in that leaving home stage. And they've battled through all of this, and they're here, and they've reproduced themselves. And now you're there, and they're here. Of course, the launching, there's a key, the one we kind of talked about this. Empty nest syndrome. You want to avoid this. The reason homesickness is the number one reason for retention problems isn't the fault of the child. I don't blame the student. It's a two-way street. That child came from a family system. That family system is the one that called this child back to them. Child's just a part of this. They play a role. So do the parents. Sometimes is there a movie called Failure to Launch? So I guess the key here would be successfully letting your kid do their own thing. Avoiding empty nest syndrome, what that means is a decline in satisfaction of the marriage when children leave the house. It should improve, and it usually does. I think I drew a graph for you once that was very poorly drawn. We usually do see an increase in marital satisfaction, sorry, no offense, when kids leave the house. And then, later life. And there's a reason I kept that triangle over here. Later life is exactly what it sounds like. Something that's not even on your radar screen. It's not on mine either. I'm not that old yet. For a lot of couples, this is a reality. This used to be full. There was a lot of these. The triangle doesn't have to be just one thing. There was children's activities, right? Keeping them, and then there's job. Well, the children left, but we still got one thing keeping them from arguing with each other, and that's the job. But what if that goes away? Uh-oh, now what? Now this couple could just completely collapse. When couples retire, it's a big deal. It's successfully navigating retirement. This is supposed to be a wonderful thing, and for most couples it is. I love this guy. I'm not sure if you guys even know him. Do you know Dr. F? EPP, have you even heard of him? He's been retired now for, I think, 3 or 4 years, so maybe not. I love, ever since he retired, his Facebook feed got so much more interesting. Him and his wife, they bicycle everywhere. They're always like in some bar, drinking gallons of wine with each other. That's what's supposed to happen. You retire, boom, you have fun, go play. You've been working for 35 years. But for a lot of couples, it ends up being like, who are you? We haven't talked in 35 years because I spend all my time at my job on purpose so that we don't have to argue with each other. So these, and again, do you have to follow this script? No. And Bowen was very adamant saying, he's not Mr. date with the family, right? You have to have the nuclear. No, that's not what he's saying at all. But it is kind of inevitable. This is sort of the natural cycle of how families develop. Some develop and run this course successfully. Others have issues. And here's our last concept. And this is why it was important to lay those out. Take those stages that you just wrote down and picture them on a timeline, horizontally. That's what Bowen would call the horizontal stressors of life on a timeline. You can predict them. Having a child, getting married, retiring, your child leaving the house. These are things that are going to happen very predictably over time. We don't know exactly when, but they're going to happen. All of our horizontal stressors are slightly different. That's completely, but horizontal stressors simply mean predictable, big changes in your life that are going to happen. You might say, well, having a kid, well, you're going to have 9 months to prepare, trust me. It's predictable. Vertical problems, what the heck? Does anyone know what he means by this? Did you listen to the... That's okay. It hasn't been up there very long. So here's our horizontal stressors. Here's this one, here's graduation from high school. Congratulations. Here's all these little things. So horizontal stressors that happen through time. Vertical problems are like asteroids that literally, they just attack you left. They even come from the bottom sometimes. These are just the things that happen. These are a car breaks down, you lose your job, you break your arm, you get COVID-19, you get quarantine, whatever it is. Vertical problems are the random stressors that occur to everyone. So what the heck? What's the point of passing this out? Or, I see one area that I'm worried about. And it would be this one. Because here, we have a vertical problem that's happening right when someone's experiencing a horizontal stressor. This is when Bowen said, you're very vulnerable. So from Bowen's perspective, families are very vulnerable to problems when vertical problems and horizontal stressors meet one another. Just practically think about this, and it makes intuitive sense. If you've got nothing going on in your life and you're just coasting, let's say you're not married, you have a job. And for a 2-year period, you're just going to your job, go to your job, go to your job, go have dinner with your friends, whatever. In other words, life is just on cruise control. There's really nothing, you're not engaged, you're not getting married. Is crap still going to happen to you? Sure. Going to get a flat tire? All right, whatever. I mean, you might get pissed, but you get over it. Well, let's say you're about to have your first child. It's stressful. I mean, it's a good stress, whatever. It's stressful. Now, let's say your car breaks down and something else happens and the dishwasher breaks. Oh my God. In other words, all he's really saying here is this is when people can get overtaxed with stress and anxiety. I hope you have really good differentiation of self because you'll probably be just fine. And most people are. But you can understand if you've got a family with really low differentiation and a bunch of individuals who are really emotionally reactive and flying off the handle left and right, they're probably not going to navigate this very well. So anyone can handle vertical problems when life is easy and we're just doing our thing. But when we're going through transitions, that's when we're really worried. Does that make sense? So horizontal problems. Horizontal stressors and vertical problems. All right. Any questions? And here's this again. So just to keep it in your mind, because we're going to hit play and watch a little bit of this film. So again, I call this series of projects, I didn't know what else to call it except for Ordinary People. And the last one we're going to use is with a movie called Ordinary People. It's actually a really good movie from the 70s. You've probably never even seen it. But anyway, more on that later. So the first film that we use, and again, I can't bring in real families. That's a little bit unethical. Here's the Johnson family. Johnson family, do your thing. Let's instigate them a little bit, right? So one way to think about theories and apply them is to watch a family do their thing and try to dissect them from a particular theoretical perspective. Such a nerd. I remember seeing this movie for the first time and thinking, I don't know, maybe I was teaching this class or something, I don't know, but Bowen just jumped out to me. And here's the thing, when you're a therapist, if you get trained, you're going to learn about 7 or 8 different ways of working with families and thinking about them. Every time you meet a couple or a family, it'll resonate with you. Like, this seems like a Bowen family. Their issues seem like that. And you'll probably use that approach. The next family you meet next week will feel completely different. But this family just resonated with me with Bowen. Maybe it will with you, but I do think it's a good one to use for his theory. So we'll watch a little bit. Has anyone ever seen it? It's called Life as a House. Okay, and I think I said too. It just so happens to star Hayden Christensen, who's that guy right there. In fact, this is the movie that got him the part of Darth Vader. He's a teenager in this film. He has some issues. I think you'll see that. He has a dark side to him, if you will. But anyway, just to give you the context a little bit so you're not completely confused in the first 5 minutes. What we're dealing with is we have a dad who is an architect. And he's divorced from his wife. You'll see that. I think the first thing you see is him alone. And Hayden is his biological son. Hayden, his name is Sam. Sam lives with his mom. His mom has since been remarried and has 2 new children with her new husband. Okay, Peter. So does that make sense? So George is the dad. He's all alone. Because he's got divorced from his wife. They had some issues. They had Sam though, and now Sam lives with his former wife. Ex-wife has been remarried and has 2 children. So that's our setup. I'll just let it play out. 2 people got mad at me on Tuesday because they wanted to watch the whole thing because they got sucked into it. So don't get mad at me.